8 months. That's how long a man can walk through a real city, full of real people, and be completely, structurally invisible. Not ignored the way we ignore strangers. Not overlooked the way a busy person overlooks background noise. Invisible in a far older, far quieter way. The way the eye slides past a fire hydrant without registering it. The way the brain files something into a category and stops seeing it as a thing that was ever a person. The city does this slowly and without malice. That's what makes it so thorough. A city is very good at this. It has had a long time to practice. His name was Marcus Webb. He was 43 years old and 6 feet tall. When you looked at his hands, really looked at them, you were looking at 12 years of working life, pressed into skin, calloused across the palms, the way topographic maps show elevation. Not a detail you would notice passing him on a street, but the kind of detail that tells you everything if you know how to read it. 12 years, landscaping, carpentry, fence construction, drainage, deck repair, the full, unglamorous spectrum of property work that keeps neighborhoods looking the way neighborhoods look. Work that happens in the cold and the rain and the dark of early mornings, while clients watch from kitchen windows and foremen keep a short list of names they call first because those names have never once let a complicated job come out wrong. Marcus kept a tape measure in his back pocket the way other men keep a phone, always there, always ready, always useful. He measured twice, cut once, and then measured a third time just to be certain. Not perfectionism, precision. Because the alternative is a structure that fails, and a structure that fails means you go back, and going back means you did not do the job right, and doing the job right was the only standard Marcus had ever worked to. He was the kind of worker a foreman calls first when the job is complicated, when the drainage does not make sense, when the client is watching too closely, and the deadline is already behind. Marcus could look at a drainage problem and solve it in his head before he had touched a single tool. That kind of competence does not come from a certification course. It comes from 12 years of showing up when it was cold and the ground was frozen and the job still had to get done right. Then, in the span of about 90 days, the floor disappeared, not through any failure of character, not through addiction or recklessness or any of the narratives the culture reaches for when it needs an explanation. The landscaping company lost 2 commercial contracts and laid off half the crew. His apartment of 6 years of on-time rent in a neighborhood that was quietly becoming somewhere else, changed hands. New management sent a letter that tripled the security deposit and increased the rent, effective next cycle. He did the math. He paid off every debt he owed. He stayed with a cousin until the space could not hold the weight of too many people in too little room. And then one gray morning in late October, he woke up with nowhere to go and no map for how to get anywhere from here. Not because he had lost control of his life, because the ground had simply been pulled away. For 8 months, he moved through the city the way people in his situation learn to move, strategically, quietly, always half a step ahead of someone telling him to leave. He knew which shelter beds opened midweek. He knew which alleys stayed dry in the rain. He knew the library's hours, not because he was reading, but because the library is one of the last public spaces in any American city that will let you exist without asking you to pay for the privilege. He had stopped asking for help, not out of pride, but out of arithmetic. He had done the asking. The math kept coming back empty, but Marcus still had his eyes. And one morning in October, eating a sandwich near the back end of a residential alley, he looked up and saw a yard that would not let him go. The yard belonged to a woman named Patricia Hale, 61 years old, widowed 2 years prior. Her husband Gerald had maintained that yard with the devoted, stubborn love that some retired men pour entirely into their properties. Every spring, a new project scoped and planned over winter. Every summer, the quiet, unassuming pride of work that holds. He had a system for everything, a compost rotation, a planting schedule, a particular way he mixed his concrete that he had arrived at through trial and error and would not deviate from. The yard was where Gerald was most himself. After he died, the yard grieved with her. The chair where Patricia used to sit with her morning coffee, watching Gerald work, stayed empty. The chair she had stopped sitting in. Grass grew waist-high in the back corner. The rear fence buckled where two posts had rotted through at the base. An old tool rack leaned against the back wall. For so long, it had developed a lean of its own. Vines consumed Gerald's raised garden bed, threading roots deep into soil that he had composted and turned carefully for 15 years. To her neighbors, it was an eyesore. To Marcus, from 30 feet away in that alley, it was a conversation waiting to happen. He walked around to the front, knocked twice. Patricia answered, and Marcus Webb, a man who had been invisible for 8 months, looked her in the eye and said, "I'm good with yards. I can see yours needs work. I'll clear the whole back section for free. All I need is permission to sleep in that far corner for a few nights while I do it." He said it directly, without apology, without the downward pull of supplication, with the quiet, leveled confidence of a tradesman stating a bid, not a plea, but a proposal. A transaction offered between two people who each have something the other needs, not charity, trade. Patricia stood in the doorway for a long, still moment. She looked at Marcus, then past him, then back at Marcus. She said, "Come back tomorrow at 7. Here is what the modern system would have done with Marcus. Given him a number, put him on a list, asked him to wait while someone with a master's degree in social work filed paperwork about his situation on his behalf. Billions of dollars flow through that architecture every year across American cities. Coordinated entry databases, vulnerability indexes, eligibility screenings, waitlist protocols, case management software updated by overworked staff and underfunded offices trying their best inside systems that were not designed to succeed. And the numbers keep rising. More people sleeping outside now than a decade ago, more than 2 decades ago. The infrastructure grew. The problem grew alongside it in perfect damning lockstep. More investment, more administrators, more software, more of the same outcome. The system's failure is not cruelty. It's not indifference, at least not in the people working inside it. It's something more structural, a machine so focused on processing people that it has forgotten, architecturally, how to see them. A system built to manage a crisis that was never designed to end it. Marcus activated something different. He presented himself not as a problem requiring a solution, but as a solution requiring a problem. He led with competence rather than need. He made the transaction horizontal. I have something to offer, you have something I need, let's trade. He did this rather than positioning himself below Patricia in a hierarchy of charity and receipt. The human brain responds to those two framings entirely differently. One activates anxiety, the other activates evaluation. One makes you want to close the door, the other makes you want to think. Marcus activated evaluation. That is the hinge the entire story turns on. He was at the gate the next morning at 7 sharp. Patricia watched from the kitchen window as he walked the yard the way a surgeon reads a patient, methodical, unhurried, cataloging before acting. He found Gerald's shed on the side of the house. Inside, a wheelbarrow, pruning shears, a post hole digger, coils of wire, a handsaw on a nail, and that particular smell of a working man's space, motor oil, dried grass, cedar, rust, the smell of things that had been used and put away carefully. Marcus ran his hand along the edge of Gerald's workbench and went still for just a moment. Then he picked up the shears and started working. By noon, the back corner's waist-high grass was cut to earth. 9 bags of green waste lined the alley. Patricia brought water out and found Marcus using a length of twine as a string line, pulled taut between two fence posts, a reference line that tells you what the eye alone cannot, whether your structure is plumb across its full run, regardless of how the ground beneath it shifts and settles over the years. Professional fence builders use this. Marcus did it without thinking, the way a concert pianist plays a scale. Automatic, invisible in execution, immediately visible in the result. Day 2, the fence. The modern shortcut for a rotted post is to drive a new post alongside the failure and let the new one carry the load. It looks fine for a season, then the sister post develops its own lean, the old post finishes rotting, and 2 years later you are exactly where you started, except older and poorer, and with no better idea of how the problem got there in the first place. Marcus dug out both rotted posts at the base, treated the holes, and set new posts in fresh concrete footing, tamped level, braced while curing, left untouched for 24 hours before a single board was touched. It takes longer. It requires more effort. The repair lasts 20 years instead of 2. That is the difference between fixing a problem and solving it. And it is a distinction that almost everything in modern life has quietly, systematically stopped making. By afternoon, the fence ran straight and true for the first time in years. Patricia came out and stood looking at it in silence for nearly a full minute. Then she said quietly, "Gerald would have done it the same way." Day 3, the garden bed. Marcus cleared the vines by hand, pulling them back in long, deliberate strips at the angle that preserves what lies underneath. What he found was extraordinary. Gerald's composted soil, 15 years deep, was still alive. Dark, dense, crumbling apart between his fingers with that loose, granular quality that farmers and gardeners call good till. A structure that lets roots breathe and water move freely. The vines had suppressed it. They had not destroyed it. He turned the soil with a hand fork, broke the clods, shaped the edges clean. He did it without being asked, because when you've been doing this work long enough, you see the whole picture, not just the portion you were assigned. That instinct for completion, for seeing the job that needs doing even when no one is watching, is exactly what genuine craft looks like from the outside. It is invisible until it isn't. And then it's unmistakable. Day 4, Patricia came out with 2 cups of coffee. She sat in the garden chair she hadn't used since the funeral. She watched him work for a while without either of them speaking. The morning was cool. The yard looked like a yard again. Then she said, "You're very good at this." Marcus said, "I know." She told him about the downspout on the north side, broken for a year. A deck board lifting since the summer before Gerald died. She said she wanted to pay him. He looked at the corner of the yard where his tarp was rigged to the fence. He said he would also like to stay. She was quiet for a long moment. She said, "That corner isn't going anywhere. No contract, no application, no case manager, no waiting list." A man who had been invisible for 8 months had a dry place to sleep and a reason to show up in the morning. Think about how long that took. Think about how simple it was. And then sit with the question of why we built an entire civilization of bureaucracy around a problem that 2 people resolved with one honest conversation on a front doorstep. The corner of Patricia's yard evolved steadily over the following weeks. The tarp became a weatherproof canopy. The canopy gave way to a small shed Marcus built himself over a single weekend, using reclaimed lumber salvaged from a demolition site 3 streets away. He insulated it with batting from a skip, sealed the gaps, and hung a secondhand door on hardware from Gerald's shelf. A cot, a lamp, a lock, built in 48 hours because he had built structures like it dozens of times before, and the muscle memory had never left him. Patricia watched it go up from the kitchen window, and she said it was the finest thing she had seen built in that yard. She was not wrong. Within 2 weeks, two neighbors knocked on her door asking about the fence. Marcus gave them his prepaid number. Within a month, he had cleared a second yard 2 doors down and repaired a rotted gate across the alley. Within 6 weeks, 4 paying clients. Within 2 months, 6 steady clients, and a weekly income climbing towards solid ground for the first time since the floor disappeared. Word travels the way it always has, person to person, earned through work that speaks for itself before you ever open your mouth. So why doesn't this happen more? 3 reasons. The first is fear. Decades of cultural messaging have linked homelessness to danger in a way profoundly disproportionate to actual reality, but the association is real, and it runs deep, and it silently vetoes thousands of moments exactly like Patricia's doorstep conversation every single day. We have been taught, without being explicitly taught, to see a category where a person is standing. The second is liability. The legal culture around informal help has become so fraught that generosity itself can feel dangerous. What does your homeowner's insurance say? What if something goes wrong and you are held responsible? Those questions, amplified by institutions that benefit from your passivity, that need your hesitation in order to remain the only option, have paralyzed millions of people at the exact moment when action was the only thing that would have made a difference. The third and most insidious, we stopped believing that people experiencing homelessness had anything to offer. We looked at Marcus and saw a problem to be referred. We forgot, or were quietly trained to forget, that we were looking at a craftsman, a man with a tape measure and 12 years of knowledge and a way of reading a yard that no amount of misfortune had managed to erase. If you have unused outdoor space, a back corner, an outbuilding, or a yard with more room than you are using, organizations like the Block Project in Seattle and Caravan in Portland have built legally supported frameworks for exactly this kind of neighbor-hosted arrangement. They handle the vetting, the structure, and the ongoing support. You provide the space. That pathway exists today. It is operational, and it is waiting for people who are willing to walk through it. If someone in your community needs work done, work you have been putting off for months because you have not found the right person, ask yourself whether the right person might already be nearby. Not charity, a fair transaction. Skill exchanged for fair pay and fair ground. Marcus did not need pity, he needed a fair field. Most people in his situation need exactly the same thing, and most of them are prepared to work for it if they are given the chance. And if you are not ready for any of that yet, if you are still working out what you are permitted to do, what the risks are, and what the rules say, there is a minimum, a floor that anyone can stand on, regardless of what else they are figuring out. The next time you walk past someone who is homeless, make eye contact. Say good morning. You are not solving a structural crisis with a nod. You are not fixing the coordinated entry system or the shortage of affordable housing with a glance and 2 words, but you are doing the one thing the entire institutional apparatus consistently, structurally, and repeatedly fails to do. You are making a person visible. And for someone who has been invisible for 8 months, visibility is sometimes the first door that everything else walks through. Marcus Webb was not a charity case. He was a craftsman who ran out of ground and found it again in the corner of a widow's backyard with a length of rope, some reclaimed lumber, and 12 years of knowledge that no amount of misfortune had managed to take from him. A man who looked at a buckled fence and saw it not as someone else's problem, but as a conversation he was qualified to start. He built something that lasts. Not just the shed, not just the fence, something harder to build and harder to knock down, a reason to be seen. The ground came back one corner at a time, one honest conversation at a time, one job done right, posts set in concrete, string line taut, edges clean at a time. That's how ground comes back. That's always how it has come back. The solution was never in the program. It was always in the people.